Okay. Okay, good morning, Dr. Fine. Good morning. I'm not sure. Good morning or early morning. It's amazing. Okay. So we're on the fifth, that's a new parak, the third parak. And that's the third parak in Lunaris. So really comes in the subject that we would say is not so much the subject of Kesuvos. The parak now, maybe the following parak also is going to be about din of Knas. Knas by onus and mafata, which is not the subject of Kesuvos. Onus and mafata means if a man rapes a woman, there's one parsha about that. And unmarried woman, nothing to do with, not about chayve misa or anything. Man raped a woman, unmarried woman. And there are two parshas about it. One is about rape, one is about seduction. And there's one that's in Parshas Kisei, it talks about onus, and Parshas Mishpatim talks about mifata. The word onus means that he forced, which means rape, and seduction is the word mifata to persuade. And just to get the general idea, in Parshas Kisei, it talks about if a man rapes a girl, nara, basula, ashalor rasa, that she's a nara. We'll see the nara usually means a girl between 12 and 12 and a half. But once his bulgaris is already mature, and breast formation usually it's referred to, and that's already more than a nara. Less than a nara would be called a ketana. There's a ketana, less than 12 years old. Nara is when she's 12 years old and it's brought puberty, hairs, 2 hairs, and 12 and a half is about 12 is a bulgaris, and then that's not called a nara anymore. So it says nara, also basula, she was a virgin, and ashallah rasa, she was not married. So over there it says that he has a knas, there's a penalty to pay 50 kesef, 50 silver pieces, whatever the amount that's going to be. We'll one day talk about it, how much that is value of that. And also he has to marry her, and he never could divorce her. That's the din of a rape. So when a person rapes, so he should realize that it's not a one-time thing, and he's going to get away with it, that he has to marry her, of course, if the girl agrees, if they want to marry her. But then he never could divorce her, and also there's a penalty. That's in Parshas Kisei. In Parshas Mishpatim, there's a din v'chiyafate ish basula shel lo ras. Also talking about a basula, and he seduced her. And he, so there it's talking about also a nara. Doesn't say the word nara over there, but also seems to be talking about a nara. And over there, he has to marry her. If he doesn't marry, if the father doesn't want his daughter to marry him, so then there's still a penalty of paying 50. He doesn't pay 50. He doesn't pay the 50 silver pieces only if he does not marry her. In the case of the onus, he has to also marry her and also pay 50 silver pieces to the father. So that's the general parsha about onus and mafata. It's a small parsha, each one separate. One is by Kisei, one is in Mishpatim. And the Mishnah starts talking about the subject of Knas. Question how it comes in over here. Why does it come into this Masechet over here? But that's going to be the next two prakim. So it starts off the subject about the women that are not. He's not. It's not wanted for him to marry. He wasn't allowed to marry them. He wouldn't be allowed to marry them. And there's a chiddush in that there's still a din of Knas. These are the girls that they get a penalty if they receive the penalty, not that they're penalized. Sheishlam Knas means that they receive the man who either raped or seduced them has to pay the penalty. They are eligible for getting the penalty, for receiving the money of the penalty. Havala mamzeres vala nesina vala kusis. A man who has relations with a mamzeres or nesina. Mamzeres is he said mamzeres mamzer. I don't know how to, and someone born of illegal union. And nesina was from the 7 nations of Am Yisrael of Eretz Yisrael, the Canaanim, that they also gave them a din rabbanan about as a mamzeres, same dinim as a mamzeres, and the kusis, which means from the people of Kus, the kusim. There was a question about their conversion and if they keep the mitzvahs. And here it says that they even though the pashtus would mean even though he's not allowed to marry them, there's other reasons why you might think by kusis, but even though he's not allowed to marry them, so you might think that the parsha of the Knas only applies to somebody that he could marry, as we're going to see the whole sugya today, that there's a chiddush over here, that even though he's not allowed to marry them, and there would be no din to marry. We said there are 2 din. One is he has to marry her and also pay a Knas. But even though over here there's no din, he cannot marry her because they're not allowed to, because he's a kind of a person that he's not supposed to marry, but they still receive the Knas if there was onus and mafata. The next halach is going to say more the din about the psul. It has to be that we said in the pasuk there has to be a virgin, and if she was once there was relations with somebody else, so she was not a virgin anymore. But here it says that if the relations were when she was less than 3 years old, that doesn't take away her virginity. If someone was an onus of mafata to a woman who converted or was redeemed or was freed from slavery when they were less than 3 years old, even though all these people, she was a goya, or if she was captured, or if she was a maidservant, so all these b'choshish that they had relations under the circumstances that they were a goya to them, so that's what happens. But since we have to assume that that's what happened, that they had relations, but since they were less than 3 years old at the time, before they were redeemed or converted, so the virgin doesn't take away our virginity. Virginity still remains, even if they were less than they were nival. They had relations since it was less than 3 years old. So this would not take away her eligibility to the knas because she's not a virgin, because she's a virgin. And the last thing is to say, not only before we said chayv lavin, these examples over here of the mamzer and the scene as chayv lavin, that it's also to marry her because there's a losa say, but even if to be chayv kares, he had relations with somebody that's chayv kares. So you might think that it's more reason that they're not allowed to marry and therefore there'd be no knas. No, even in this case also. All these relations are chayv kares. They're not allowed to marry. If they have relations, someone has relations with a sister, or with his father's sister, his mother's sister, his wife's sister, his brother's wife, or his father's brother's wife, which we also call the aunt. Over here, we call all these three, in English, we call all of them an aunt, but these are all listed over here as aunts. Also, we said, if that would be called also a sister-in-law by us, his wife's sister, or his brother's wife's, or his, that brother's wife, right, also, sister-in-law. So, and Anida, also as a chayv kares, yesh lam knas. They also receive knas. So the Mishnah said all these cases that do receive knas, they don't lose the eligibility to receive the knas, even though it's chayv lavin. The Mishnah then says even though chayv kares. In between it said also she still be considered a basula if she had relations before the age 3. And the Mishnah ends off this last thing about chayv kares, avapiche hein be kares, and then Mrs. Bezin, even though they're chayv kares, and they might think that's the reason they should not be eligible to knas, but it says no, that they're not chayv Mrs. Bezin. The Mishnah implies that if he would have had relations with somebody that is a death penalty, to somebody such a kind of a relation that would have been a death penalty, then there'd be no knas, and that goes into the subject about kam levid rabin. If somebody does a transgression that includes both a monetary penalty and also death penalty, so then there's only the death penalty, and it overrides the monetary penalty. If someone would, for instance, just take a extreme example, somebody shot and killed somebody, so does he have to pay? So of course it's chayv misa for killing. Does he also have to pay the suit that he tore? So there's kam levid rabin, and he doesn't pay for the monetary loss that he caused since he's getting killed, since he did a chayv misa. So that would be no knas. If he
Does it have reason?
Why do we say, I don't know, is the Sforah say come levid rabin? We only give him the more serious punishment. There's something I heard that someone in the class said one double jeopardy. I'm not sure what that means. In the court also could be something that maybe
why not?
Maybe it's why not? Why doesn't the one act that had 2 liabilities in it? He brought on himself 2 liabilities with one act. I'm not sure if that's what double jeopardy means. I'm not sure, but I don't know. I don't know if there's a Sforah to that. So that was the Mishnah in general.
You can't try them again
for the same thing.
Right.
So then I got it wrong. That's not a double jeopardy. Here the case is that you can't try him again for the same. Here I meant to say that if there's one act that caused on him 2 liabilities, that also monetary and also a death penalty, so then he doesn't get the monetary penalty.
Right.
And here the Mishnah is saying that only applies when we're actually chayv misa bezdin. But here kares, even though it's heavenly excision, death penalty, but it's not a human, it's not an earthly death penalty. So therefore that cloud doesn't apply, and the Gemara is going to get into that more or less tomorrow. So in general, what the Mishnah say that the halacha of knas but applies even to chayv lavin, even to chayv krisos, as long as she's a basula. And the basula says here that if she had relations before the age 3, it doesn't take away her virginity. The first thing the Gemara talks about is yes.
These girls like a tanim or
Here it says nara. The Mishnah says nara, which means between 12 and 12 and a half. And we're going to talk about the next case. We'll talk about your case of ktana. What's the halacha about ktanas? He said, take the Mishnah literally. It means nara, means between 12 and 12 and a half. That's really the lashon of the pasuk. That the pasuk says nara both times by Yonas and Kim ish nara basula and bechiyafata ish. But it doesn't say nara, but I think we learn out one from the other. Also, and both of them are nara.
and what about a girl that's 15 years old?
Right. So here they say that there's no knas for them. We have to see later on the sugis about that. But a Bulgaris doesn't get knas. So what's halacha there? He goes free. So we have to see that later on. Okay, the Gemara continues. So the first statement of the Mishnah was very strange. I explained it, but that's really the explanation. That's really the explanation that the Gemara is going to say. I just read it into the Mishnah. It seems to say these are the ones that are eligible for Knas, and it only says the problem. It only says the case of the Chayv Lavan, as if to say that the Chayv Lavan, they're the ones that get Knas. How about a kosher girl? Nothing was done wrong. So, of course, that's the Pshat in the Mishnah, and the Gemara speaks it out. Hani Naras Psula Sislu Knas, Ksheris Lo, that only the ones that are not allowed to be married, those are the ones who get knas, but a regular kosher girl that somebody raped or seduced, they don't get knas. So of course not. The Mishnah means psulos. Yeah, it's coming to say that these are the ones that even though the puzzle still they get knas. That's what the Mishnah means. That's really the Pashup Shat, but the Gemara speaks out that the words are a bit not accurate. You have to understand it. That it means that these are the naras that even though the puzzle they still get knas. Of course the kosher girls get knas. That's not a chiddush. That's the pasuk. The Mishnah is coming to say that even though he's not allowed to marry them, still they're eligible for knas. Nara in katana lo. That's what she was talking about. It says nara. So the Mishnah sounds like only a nara. And we know that there are three stages of maturity. There's the first a katana, that she's considered a minor. Then nara means that she's an adult. And then bogeres, which is half a year later, then she's considered completely mature. And that's a different stage. And the pasuk, everyone seems to say that nara and the pasuk comes to exclude a bogeres. But the question is, how about a ketana? So Amish says nara, and he takes it literally. Dafka nara, ketana lo. Amish would hold that a ketana less than 12 years old. When I say 12 years old, I mean also that she has 2 hairs. If she doesn't have 2 hairs, then she's not a nara yet. She has to have 12 years and also have grown 2 hairs. So Amish knows that a ketana not, that if she's less than adult, she's a child, minor, so she's not eligible for knas. And the Gemara is going to say that that's a machlokas tanon, mantana that only be according to Meir. We're going to see right now. Bryce has a machlokas. The Meir holds like that. The Chachamim are going to argue, and we're going to hold like the Chachamim that the katana is also eligible for knas. The Tanya katana b'ashem mechad b'ashem tavish teisa v'sheish lo mechad ve'en lo knas. Katana, that's from 1 day old until adulthood, which is 2 hairs, 2 pubic hairs. So the here brings in the din about mecher also. There's a din that a father he's allowed to sell a daughter as a maidservant until she's able to be married. And the person who's buying her is not just buying her as a maidservant, he's buying her in order to temporarily serve as a maid, and then when she becomes of age, he'll marry her. That's the din of mecher, that the Parshas Mishpatim, and we'll get to that one day, but here it says, it's comparing the din of knas to the din of the ability of a father to be able to sell the daughter. He only can sell her only to the stage of Amavriya, only when she's a katana, not when she's a gadol, not when she's 12 years old, only until 12 years old. So here it says that this girl who's a katana, she's a minor, yesh la mecher. It's possible for the father to sell her, but ain't lo knas. She's not eligible for knas. That's not what we're looking for. That Amish says katana lo. That's like Meir. Meir says that a katana is not eligible to knas. The Brisa goes on. We'll get to we really want to get to the Chachamim who argue, but so far we have this is the first shita of Meir. Once she's a nara, until she's a bogeres, during that stage of naras, she is eligible for knas, but she's not eligible for being sold. The father can't sell her once she's a nara. That's what Meir says. Meir says that the girl who's a katana is not eligible for knas. Different Meir. So Meir Omer, kamakom sheish mecha in knas, kamakom sheish knas in mecha. These two things don't overlap. Whenever the father is allowed to sell her, there would be no knas if she would be nenas or mafuta, because he holds that the mecher is only for a katana and knas is only for a nara. So if she's a katana and she's eligible to be sold, then she's not eligible to receive the knas. If she's old enough to get knas, means she's already 12 years old, then she's past the age of being sold because she's not a katana anymore. So that was what we were looking for. The Rebbeinu says there's no knas to a katana. But here we want the Chachamim. The Chachamim that the katana also from 1 day old, not until 12 years old, until bogeres, including a nara. So katana and a nara, both of them are eligible for knas. But the Gemara doesn't like the words over here. Knas in mechalo. We're talking about both. We were talking about knas and mecher, the ability to sell the daughter. So I need to say that there's no ability. The father is not allowed to sell her. He doesn't hold it in that a father could sell the daughter. It's a pasuk in the Torah. That there is also an overlapping that it's possible to have a knas even though he also could sell her during that half year. So even during the first 12 years that he's allowed to sell her, she's also eligible to knas. There is going to be a time that there's only knas and not mecher, but when she's old, that's only this knas and then there's no mecher. But the time of knas would be overlapping. So what does the sugya say? That even though our Mishnah says that a Ketana is not eligible for Knas, but that's only Rav Meir. The Chacham argue and say that a Ketana is eligible for Knas. That's how we pass it seems. Now the Gemara continues to the main sugya. Now we're getting into the sugya, and we said that the girls that said about a mamzeres and a sina that they're chayv 11, they're not supposed to marry. So it's a big kiddush because the pasuk says he should marry and pay. That the pasuk says that he should marry her, that this woman should be for him as a wife. He's chayv to take her as a wife, and it says that if she's appropriate, she's eligible to be a wife, and these women are not. And if he's not supposed to marry her, so it could be the whole parsha is only talking about a woman who he could marry, but these women he's not allowed to marry, so then they shouldn't be included either in the parsha of knas. He shouldn't have to pay the knas either. That's the kasha. So we have here first two tirutzim: Rish Lakish, Nara, Nara, Hanara. That the pasuk says two times the word Nara. The Gemara makes it sound like it's three times. It's only three times after you have the drash. Really, it says Nara one time, and then it says Hanara. And the word that should be with the hay over there. Didn't let me do it. Let's see if I can get it on now. The Hanara, right? It says so. Really, it does says Nara and Hanara, but the word Hanara could be divided into two, as if it would say Nara without a hay, and also add on the hay also. So altogether, we look at it as if it says three times. Again, it says two times. It says one. The pasuk says Ki Ish Nara B'Sula Shel Nara. So that's really Nara B'Sula. Then it says V'Nasan Ha'ish Hashachei B'Mo Lavi Hanara. So it says again the word Hanara. So and the word Hanara could be divided into two, as if it says Nara, but also says extra hey Hanara. So altogether, there are three times that we have to darshan. Chad L'Kufe, Chad L'Sui Chayve Lavin, V'Chad L'Sui Chayve Krisos. That one is just telling you the main halacha that it has to be a Nara. So that's why he says the word Nara. But then you have two extra psukim. L'Kufe means that you need it for the Pashup Shad, but then it has two extra times. So we look at it. One is coming to tell you that even though the Chayve Lavin and he's not allowed to marry her, like it says, "V'lo si Elisha, you can marry her," but still. There still is going to be the halacha of knas, even though he cannot marry her, even though it's chayv lavin. And the second one is come to even chayv krisos, which is even more not allowed to marry her. We'll see soon the sugi about that. And still, there's a din of knas. Say as a pasuk, nara hanara, to tell you that even if it's chayv lavin, even if it's chayv krisos. That was Rish Lakish's teretz. That was Rish Lakish. And Rav Papa says, Rav Papa Amar different teretz. The basulo, sab basulo. It's also the same idea, but different pasuk. In the next parsha where it talks about the Mefata and Pasha Mishpatim, over there it says V'chi Fata Ish Basula, and then it says she should give her Kamora Basulo, she should give her the price, the money that people give usually as a Nadunya, that the man in those times used to give to the woman 50 pieces of silver. That's what the standard price of giving to the woman when he marries her. So that also has extra words because it could have said basula, and then there's another time where it says habasulos. The second, it doesn't say three times. It says basula and it says habasulos. The word habasulos can be divided into basulos and habasulos. So as if it has three times basula, basulos, habasulos, and again the same kind of drasha. One has to be set at a pashup shat, that she has to be a virgin in order to be eligible, and then there are two extra times that it says it again, the extra psukim. So we learn out even if he's not allowed to marry her, and even if he's not allowed to marry her, Chavi Krisos, still they are eligible for Knas. So that's the drasha, the Kasha. What's the source of this halacha that they get Knas even though he's not allowed to marry her? And we had two Terutzim, Rish Lakish and a Papa. One said Nara, Nara, Hanara, and one said Basula, Basula, Basulos. Now, as usual, the Gemara says that what does each one do with the other one's drasha? That's extra pasuk for each one. The Papa, my time, Rish Lakish. What is a Papa going to do with Rish Lakish who says Nara and he has extra words on Nara? What is he going to do with that drasha? We have a that what if the girl died before he had a chance to pay up? He raped the girl, and then she died before he had a chance to pay. Is he chayv to pay? So it says if after he had relations with her she died, he doesn't have to pay because it says he pays to the father of the girl, but she has to still be alive. She has to be a nara. Once she's died, lo lavi mesa. So that's why that's to say an extra time. You don't have so many drashas extra because one of them has to tell you that only if the girl is still living. But if she died, then there'd be no obligation. That's why if Papa didn't want to darshan from Hanara, he darshan from Basula. And then the kasha the other way. What does Rish Lakish do with the extra Basula, Basulos? Rish Lakish matam alamim Papa. Why doesn't he hold it at drasha? He also says he needed something else. Only by the Gzera Shava. The Tanya Kesef Ishkol Kamara Basulos, Shezer Kamara Basulos, Amara Basulos. It has come to how much she has to pay her the father chamishim kesef. That says openly he has to pay 50 pieces of silver. But by Mefata, it doesn't say how much to pay. It just says he should pay Kemah Basulos, which doesn't say how much it is. The Pashup shot is that he pays how much was standard to pay when a man married a girl. How much did he give her as an adunya? Dowry, they call it, right? How much give a dowry? So that's the Pashup shot. But the Gemara is saying we don't know how much that is. But the Gzera Shava, Basula, it says both places, both by Nara and by Onus and by Mefata, it says the word Basula. So the Gzera Shava will tell us that they go together with each other. That both of them is going to be 50. That it has to be Chamishim, and also they say that it's supposed to be Kesef Yishkol, that's Eshkol, and whatever the drush is going to be. But in order to learn out that the Chamishim Shekel also applies to Onus. So that's why he doesn't have the word basula extra, because he has to use it for something else. So each one says, I can't use your drusha because I need it for something else. But now the Gemara goes further and says that both of them are right. That you have to use each pasuk for the extra thing that each one learned out. We just said each one doesn't know the other drusha because it's already used up. So now we turn to both of them and say, don't you agree to each other that all these psukim are necessary for the other one's drusha? So how could neither drusha is good now? Ella, the Gemara now says that everyone holds of each other. Not that Rav Papa and Rish Lakish were arguing. It's true that Rish Lakish is the one who said Nara, Nara, Nara. Rav Papa is the one who said Basula, Basula, Basulas. But they're not arguing with each other. They're all in agreement. You need all the psukim. You need all these psukim in order to come to this conclusion. The answer is Ella, Shita, Kroig, Sibi. Altogether, there are 6 psukim. It means all of them. Nara, Nara, Hanara, Basula, Basulas, Basulas. She has all of them. And trade the Gufayu. You have to have one of them. Each one, you have to have one Nara and one Basula to tell you the Pashup shot. And then you have extra psukim. You have 4 extra psukim. Nara Hanara and Basula Basulos, Chada Chadavai, V'chada Gzer Shava. Then everybody agrees to each other. One is to tell you that only if the girl is alive, not as she died. The other one is to tell you that the amount of onus that Mefata pays is also 50 shkalim. You need all those psukim. And now you still have 2 psukim. You have Hanara and you have Basulos. And now you have these 2 extra psukim. Chada Suyachai V'Lavan, Chada Suyachai V'Krisos. That everyone agrees to all these drushes to tell you have 2 extra psukim to tell you that even if there was Isser to marry her, and even if there was a Chai V'Krisos to marry her, and you're not allowed to marry her, but still there's still going to be a knas. So that's the end of that Gemara. We looked for the source from the top of the page until here. We looked for the source. How do you know that there should be knas if you're not allowed to marry her? And we found the drushes. That is, we also found that 2 extra halachas on the side also, that if the girl dies, then there's no payment. And the second drusha was that Mefata, that it doesn't say how much she has to pay, also has to be chamishim kesef, chamishim shekel kesef. And now the Gemara continues with a new sugya. Means our Mishnah holds the favorish that even Chavi Lav and even Chavi Krisos, also there's still a payment of onus and Mefata. And now the Gemara says, not so simple, that our Mishnah is not arguing with other, not everybody agrees with. But we just spoke about that. It's a chiddush, that even though he's not allowed to marry her, and that part of the mitzvah is not going to apply, but still he has to pay knas. Not so simple. There are Tanam that argue about that. Our Mishnah is against other Tanam. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Velosi El Isha, my Mishnah's possibly just said, Velosi El Isha, that he has to marry her, and because of that, Shimon Atim Omer, Isha Sheish Ba'avaya, only a woman that there could take effect marriage. But if it's a woman that that marriage wouldn't take effect, so then he cannot marry her, and also he doesn't pay knas. Only a woman that is allowed to marry, which sounds very similar. Both of them are saying that if it's a woman that is not allowed to marry, so then, or the marriage doesn't take effect, so then there's no din of knas. And Amish against our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that even though it's chayvi krisos and it's really no connection at all, but still there is a din of paying knas. And now we have time that argue. Now the Gemara is going to go internally between the two of them. Shimon Atimni that said there has to be a woman that marriage could take effect. And if Shimon ben Ashi says there has to be a woman that is allowed to marry, is there any machlokas between them? It sounds like they're arguing. These 2 opinions, Shimon Atimni and Shimon ben Ashi are arguing among themselves. Of course, they're arguing in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says even if he chayvi krisos also has knas. But these Tanoim hold not. But what's the difference between them internally? My benayu. And now the Gemara is going to go for a while to discuss why a woman that is not allowed to marry, the marriage will take effect. So in general, we know that as the halacha would be that only chayvi krisos the marriage doesn't take effect, but chayvi lav and the marriage does take effect, even though he's not allowed to marry her. But if he gave her kedushin, then they're married, and he has to give her a get. He's not allowed to stay married to her, but the kedushin does take effect. And chayvi krisos doesn't even take effect if someone gives a ring to his sister and says, nothing happened. He doesn't have to divorce her either. But if he gives a ring to a mamzeres, Nasina, so he gave her kedushin, so it does take effect, even though he's not allowed to. That's how the Gemara starts. Examples of chayve lavin, that it's a chayve lavin. If the condition is that it has to take effect, so marriage does take effect. There's not allowed to marry her, but if he would have, marriage would have taken effect. That's enough, and there would be knas. Even according to Shimon HaTimni that says that if the chayve krisos, there's no knas, but he'd agree that chayve lavin is knas. Means only argues partially on what our Mishnah says. The one that says it has to be a woman that is allowed to keep. That since it's a chayve lavin, he's not allowed to marry her. So even according, so our Mishnah is extreme that even chayve krisos also is knas. Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe is the other extreme that if he's not allowed to marry even chayve lavin, there's no knas. Shimon HaTimni is someplace in between. He says that if there's no kedushin tofes, if it's chayve krisos, then there's no knas. But if only be chayve lavin, he wouldn't be allowed to marry her. But if he does marry her, it takes effect. Then there is knas because it has kedushin. The Gemara goes on a tangent now to say that it's not so simple, that not everybody holds like that. We heard Rabbi Kiva a lot of times. Rabbi Kiva holds, and we had him a couple of times. Although Rabbi Kiva is ain't kedushin tofsim b'chayve lavin, my benayu. Rabbi Kiva holds that there's no kedushin, doesn't take effect even chayve lavin also. If someone would have given kedushin to a mamzeres, that's a chayve lavin, so it doesn't take effect. She doesn't need to get. Nothing happened. They didn't do anything. So according to him, they're both the same thing. Where's their case that the marriage you're not allowed to marry, but if you did, it takes effect? What's the case? Allah not, also not. So the Gemara tries. That Rabbi Kiva also holds that Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry an almana. It's also a chayve lavin, but it seems that it's different because it only applies to Kohanim. It's a special for Kohanim. So that Rabbi Kiva also might say that there is kedushin tofes. The Tanya of Shimon Yomer and I call also Rabbi Kiva mamzer and chusman almana Kohen Gadol. Shari Omer Torah lo yikach lo yichalel chilul nevosa and also mamzer. That even according to Rabbi Kiva that says that even chayve lavin also is a mamzer, the child born. It goes together. Mamzer means if the kedushin is not tofes, then the child born of that union is a mamzer. If the kedushin takes effect, even though they weren't allowed to marry, but if then the child mamzer. Rabbi Kiva holds that everyone's a mamzer. Anybody that's born from chayve lavin is a mamzer, except Amalek Kohen Gadol, because over there it says that he should not take. Lo yikach lo yichalal. He shouldn't take an almana because he's going to what's the word yichalel? To profane. He's going to profane his children. That means that the children are going to become halalim. Chilulin and rosa ve'nosim mamzerim. The result of that union is only going to be a halal if a kohen gadol marries a almana. So then the result is going to be a halal, but not is going to be a mamzer. So at this point, the Gemara is saying that Rabbi Kiva would agree that isura kahuna does not make a mamzer. So we found the case that you're not allowed to marry, but still would take effect if this will be a case. That I think Rashi says also a kohen headed, a grush and a kohen headed also. Right, Rashi said, who adin grush headed, let's see Rashi over here, that not dafka, where's the Rashi? Who adin grush headed. That since it's only a din of kahuna, over there, Kiva also holds that only makes a cholol and it doesn't make a mamzer. So that would be a case of an afkamina between these two opinions. If there be a ma'anes of a isura kahuna, that a kohen raped a grusha. All these cases we have to, we'll see more details as we go on. But that would be a case that he wasn't allowed to marry her. He's not allowed to marry her. So according to Madama, it says that it has to be Rui L'Kaim. It's not Rui L'Kaim. He's not allowed to marry. You can't stay married to her. The one that says Kedushin is Tofes, even according to Rabbi Kiva, because Isur Kuna, even Rabbi Kiva holds that Kedushin takes effect. The Gemara says not so simple. That was only Rabbi Simoy, but Rabbi Yeshabov argues. Rabbi Yeshabov, Dama Bo Natsech, V'Netzoach, V'Nenatzech, Ala Kiva ben Yosef, Shaya Omer, Kol Shein Lo B'Yeh B'Yisrael, Avlad Mamzer. He says, let's come and overpower Rabbi Kiva, who's making a lot of mamzerim. According to Rabbi Kiva, there are many mamzerim. Whoever doesn't have B'Yeh Yisrael, which the word seems to say, whoever's not allowed to marry, whoever's not allowed to have it wasn't a legitimate marriage, so then the child is a mamzer. He's according to him, there's a lot of mamzerim. We have to overcome Rabbi Kiva, who's making so many mamzerim in Am Yisrael. So what he seems to say that even Almana, the Kohen Gadol, even though it's only Yisur Kuhuna, also they are mamzerim. So according to him, there's no difference. Rabbi Kiva seems to hold, according to Rabbi Yeshavov at least, that any time that you're not allowed to marry, the child is going to be a mamzer according to Rabbi Kiva. According to that, is any nafkamina between the two opinions of Rabbi Shimon HaTimni and of Shimon ben Menashe, a woman that doesn't have kedushin and a woman that you're not allowed to marry. According to Rabbi Yeshavov, according to Rabbi Kiva, there's no such difference because whenever you're not allowed to marry, even if it's chayve kuna, also the child is a mamzer. So is there any nafkamina? My benayu, ike benayu, at the top of the page. Chayav bechayve yasei mitzri badomi, which the Gemara means to say regular asay, a mitzvah asay. Till now we spoke about lavin. We spoke about chayve krisos, chayve lavin that applied to kahuna. Now the next try is going to be Chayve say that even according to Rabbi Akiva, if it's only a positive commandment, by Mitzvah Adomi, it says that the third generation is allowed to enter Am Yisrael. The Mitzvah, if a Mitzri, an Egyptian or an Adomi, they're goy, they converted, regular convert, it's allowed to marry into Am Yisrael, the first generation. But Torah says by a Mitzri and Adomi, these two nations, so they can't marry into Am Yisrael till the third generation. It means they can become Jewish, they can marry a convert, but they can't marry into a born Jew, only the third generation. And that was supposed to deduce from that the first and second generation may not. But it doesn't say specifically do not. It says the third generation may. And Rashi calls that Allah say that it's a negative commandment which is derived because the pasuk says a positive commandment. It says marry the third generation. That means first and second not. That's called Chai B'Yaseh. So the one wants to say, even according to Rabbi Akiva, he also agrees that Chai B'Yaseh the Kedushin is Tofus. Even though he said that Rabbi Akiva holds not only Chai B'Krisus, even Chai B'Elaven, and maybe even Chai B'Elaven that are only for kahuna. But he also agrees that Chai B'Yaseh is not a mamzer. So we'll find the case that someone's not allowed to stay married to her. This Mitzri Adomi, he was ma'anes, so mafata a girl, so he's not allowed to marry her. He can't stay married because Mitzri Saseh, but the kid doesn't. But there is kedushin tofus. So that would be a machlokas between these two opinions of Shimon HaTimni and Rab Shimon ben Manasseh. But the Gemara says that's not so simple. What Rabbi Yeshua holds, he holds that even a Mitzri Adomi, Chai B'Yaseh, also a kibbutz makes a mamzer. But Rabbi Yeshua, the words we had before, that Rabbi Simoy said, here it goes, Rabbi Simoy said, Menakol, also Rabbi Kiva mamzerin, and then Rabbi Yeshua argued on that and said, let's overpower Rabbi Kiva that says that everyone is a mamzer. So what did he mean to say? If he's talking to Rabbi Yeshua, means you say that Chai B'Kuna is not, Chutz Mi'amon L'Kohen Gadol, Chai B'Kuna is not a mamzer according to Rabbi Kiva. I say no, according to him, Kol She'en Lo B'Yev Yisrael, even Chai B'Kuna. If he came to say that, then it could be that he also agrees that Chai B'Yaseh are not going to be a mamzer according to Rabbi Kiva, and then this teres will be good. That will be good. This teres, he said that Rabbi Kiva agrees that Chai B'Yaseh is not a mamzer. That's good according to Rabbi Yeshua. If he only meant to oppose Rabbi Simoy, and he's only coming to say that Rabbi Kiva holds that Chai B'Kuna is also a mamzer, but he also would agree that Chai B'Yaseh is not a mamzer. But if he's saying a statement, he wasn't talking to anybody. He said a statement that Rabbi Kiva says, Kol She'en Lo B'Yev Yisrael Chavlad Mamzer. That sounds like even a Chai B'Yaseh. So that opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, according to Rabbi Kiva, holds even Chai B'Yaseh is also the kid is a mamzer. Means that there's no kedushin tofus. So then the kasha comes back. My benayu. Is there any case where you're going to say that you're not allowed to marry, but the marriage takes effect? So far, we're going very extreme. According to Rabbi Kiva, there's no such thing. Even Chai B'Yaseh, the worst case, the easiest case, the most lenient case, is going to be. Also, kedushin is not tofus. So there's no such thing. Whenever you're not allowed to marry, for any reason, the child's going to be a mamzer. It means that the kedushin is not tofus. Is there any case that you're not allowed to marry, but if you did marry, the marriage takes effect? So the more finds a case. My benayu, you can benayu bulu l'kohen gadol. That din, besides the fact that it says that a kohen gadol is not allowed to marry a widow, it says that then he has to marry a virgin. But that's said as a mitzvah saseh. You should only take a virgin, and that's expressed as a mitzvah saseh. And the Gemara explains right away why is that better. It's not a universal commandment because it only applies to Kohanim. So as far as the Chai B'Kuna over there, he says that's a lav, and that also applies. The kedushin is not tofus. But if it's both, that it's only a mitzvah saseh, and also it only applies to Kohanim, even Rabbi Kiva holds that it's not a mamzer. So we succeeded in finding according to everybody, there's a case where you're not allowed to marry, and if you got married, it does take effect. Even Rabbi Kiva is the most extreme, according to Rabbi Yeshua, according to one pshat, that he holds even Chai B'Yaseh also would make the child a mamzer, and the kedushin is not tofus. But everybody holds is one case. Budul Kohen Gadol, that it's seish kahuna. Everybody would agree that the child born is not going to be a mamzer. So that more or less finishes the sugya. I mean, a little bit more, a couple of lines more. Amar Rav Chisda, Hakal Modim B'Ba'al Anida Shem B'Shalim Knas. Even though we said that some hold that a chayve krisas, or some say even a chayve lavin, and some say even a chayve krisas does. How does it go? We just said that they argue and they hold. Our Mishnah holds that even chayve krisas pays knas. Now we found that some hold chayve krisas does not pay knas. Some hold even chayve lavin doesn't pay knas. But everyone's going to agree. But the Mishnah says that Anida does pay knas. Everyone agrees to that. That this owner, Samafata, the girl was a nida, happened to be a nida at the time. So is that a reason to say that if you hold chayve krisos, or anybody that you're not allowed to marry, not allowed to have relations with, there's not going to be a knas, so a nida should also be excluded. According to these madiyamim, they say they don't get knas. Chayve lavan or chayve krisos don't get knas, so a nida shouldn't get knas because he wasn't allowed to marry her. But he says no. The mandam yesh ba'avaya, hanam yesh ba'avaya. The mandam avui l'kaima, hanam avui l'kaima. A nida, even though she's chayve kares, that's an exception to the other ones. And this we had in Gemara Yavamis also, that if someone did marry a nida, means a regular woman, she's kosher, everything's fine, but she happened to be a nida at the time that he gave her the kedushin. Everybody holds that kedushin takes effect, even though temporarily she's a nida and there's a chayve kares to have relations with her presently. But since she's a woman that passes, it's a temporary thing. It's not an erba. She's a woman who's right now she's in the middle of a menstrual cycle, so that kedushin is tofus, and also Rui Lakaima, he's also allowed to marry her. He's not supposed to have married her while she was a nida, but that doesn't mean that he can't keep her anymore. He's not a keeper. She goes to the mikveh, he keeps her. So everyone would hold to the Mishnah that a nida there is knas, even though they're arguing about the part of the Mishnah. Let's go back to the Mishnah a second to see an amaral of today's Mishnah. Spoke here in the Mishnah about all kinds of chayve krisos. It said about lachosa, chosav, chosim. All these are chayve krisos. It also ended up ala nida. Here's that nida also yeshlam knas. And our Amish is extreme. Even though mamash chayve krisos, a sister, an aunt. Also there is knas, even though it's chayve krisos. It's not royal l'kaimo. It's elesh ba'havaya. But still there is knas. But everyone agrees to this point that a nida, even those who argue on our Mishnah, they agree by a nida that there is going to be knas.
Maybe I got lost someplace, but Be'ula, they'll call him good. If she's a Be'ula, there's no class anyway.
There's no class because she's not a basula. I think you didn't get lost. I think I got lost. But you seem to be. I don't know. I didn't think into it. You're right. Okay, I didn't. Yeah, Tyson. Let's see. So the Rashi and Taisa talk about it. I see. I didn't do that. And the Rashi is bothered by Yikasha. How could she still be a basula? Here's Rashi. Look, something that wasn't Rashi's point. That's the last Rashi. The words of Rashi. Bula shlo kedarka iri the ikadarka sula knas. So I think that's Rashi is referring to, that your kasha like to find that she shouldn't have knas because she's a bula. So Rashi says in order to avoid that problem, Rashi says that it must be shlo kedarka, that it wasn't in the place where it makes her to become a bula. And Tosfos goes into that. Pirish b'kuntris the bula shlo kedarka or kasha plukta meir v'avulazehi. The Gemara should have gone into that. Okay, so
Okay.
I didn't look into it, but nice on the ball, and I missed it. Okay, thank you. So Dr. Fine's pointing out that besides the whole point about the royal Lakaim, the pasuk says open, he has to be a basula, and this bula is not anymore a basula anymore. Yeah, very good. Okay, the Gemara continues. Just a few more lines. We're stopping already, but a few more lines. Our Mishnah that said chayve krisos gets knas. So we went into the sugya. We just spoke about it. That chayve krisos is a big chiddush because the pasuk says v'lo si'eli isha, that he's supposed to marry her and he can't marry her, and even if he marries her, kedushin doesn't take effect. That's not simple, that there should be knas to a woman that is not allowed to marry, and if he marries, doesn't take effect. But our Mishnah says, like we said before, this psukim, nara, basulos, to learn out that that's not a problem, even though he's not allowed to marry her, but the knas still does take effect. But there was a side point. There's a different point, which the Mishnah itself related to. It pointed out that there's an issue about kamli b'drabmine, that when a person is chayiv, he did something which has two liabilities. He's only chayiv for the bigger liability, not for the smaller one. And our Mishnah said that doesn't apply to karas. When someone does an avera, that's a monetary fine, like over here, that is ma'anis or mefata, a woman. So there's the monetary fine, 50 shkolim. And the Mishnah says, even though he's chayiv karas, which is heavenly death, heavenly excision, but it's not chayiv mises bezdin. It's not something on the earthly bezdin. Earthly court doesn't punish, so it's not called kamli b'drabmine. And that's what the Gemara is going to point out, that there is an opinion that argues, there is an opinion that says that kamli b'drabmine applies even to chayv kares. If someone does a avera, some kind of a transgression that makes him liable both for a monetary fine and also for a chayv kares, even though it's not a mises bezdin, it's also enough reason to say that he should not pay, and he say on that kamli b'drabmine. And that the Gemara points out that our mission is against that Tana. There is a Tana that argues. This is a new sugya, like Rashi says, that it's a new sugya. I put 2 dots over here just to point out that it's a new sugya. That our Mishnah is against Rav Nechuna ben Kana, the Tanya, because the Brisa says Rav Nechuna ben Kana Yos Hashem Kippurim Kishabbos L'Tashlumin. Ma Shabbos Mischai B'Nafsho Potem L'Tashlumin. After Kippurim Mischai B'Nafsho Potem L'Tashlumin. We said a second ago in the Mishnah, we gave an example, an extreme example, that somebody killed somebody. He killed somebody, he also tore his suit on the way. So you're not going to pay for the suit because there's a chi of Mrs. Bezdin. And then another example would be that somebody burnt somebody else's field. He burnt down somebody else's barn on Shabbos. So making a fire on Shabbos, when making that fire, is chayiv Mrs. Bezdin. He's chayiv skila for that. So he's not going to have to pay for the monetary loss that he made for somebody. Even that's not a fine; it's a regular nezek that he caused somebody damage. He doesn't have to pay for the damages because that act that he did, that make a fire, that itself incurred upon him a death penalty. So he's not chayiv for the monetary payment because he's getting the more severe payment. And how about Yom Kippur? If he did it on Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur is not death penalty. If someone transgresses Yom Kippur, when malach, it's chayiv kares, but he's not chayiv Mrs. Bezdin. So our Tana means the regular, what we hold is that he's chayiv to pay because there's no kamli b'drabine, because he's not chayiv Mrs. Bezdin, it's only chayiv kares. But the Mechon ben Kana argues, he makes the same thing as Shabbos as far as payments go. Just like Shabbos, if someone was mazik, he damaged somebody at the same time that he was Mechal Shabbos, he doesn't have to pay because Kamle B'Dravmine. And also Yom Kippur, even though it's not Chayv Mrs. Best, it's only Kares. If he would have set fire to something on Yom Kippur, so Choni ben Akana holds he's also part from paying because Kamle B'Dravmine that a bigger liability is going to be the Chayiv Kares. Once it's Chayiv Kares, with that action is not Chayiv for monetary penalties or damages. So too, according to Choni ben Akana, in our Mishnah, he would say that there's no payment of the knas, not because of the whole sugi of Velosi Elisha that has to be roy to marry and roy to get marriage to take effect, not because of that. He's parted because by that act that he had relations with a woman that's Chayiv Kares, a sister, an aunt, whatever it might be. So that act incurred upon him a penalty of Chayiv Kares. So he's not Chayiv for the penalty of knas, which is a monetary payment because Kamle B'Dravmine. That's the end of the sugya today. We didn't do it the whole time, but we went overtime sometimes. Today's less under time. Just to go through the halachas, that is Amish knows that is knas for a chayve lavin and chayve kares. We found that Tanam that argue, some hold that chayve kares there would not be for one of two reasons. We just saw the last sugya about Rabbi Nechuna ben Akana about kamle b'Rabine, and there's also a sugya of Rabbi Shimon HaTimni that says that it was who was it again? Shimon HaTimni. That has the Eshma Havaya. It has to be somebody who Kedushin takes effect, and here it doesn't take effect because it's Chayve Kares. And there's another one that says that even Chayve Lavin also not, that even anything that you're not allowed to marry, anybody not allowed to marry, that it's not called Osi Elisha, there's not going to be anything of Knas. The Gemara went into Rabbi Kiva on the side that he holds that there's not Tofes Kedushin even by Chayve Lavin, maybe even by Chayve Lavin Tekuna, maybe even by Chayve Aseh, but he also agrees that if it's only going to be say the kuna, he also agrees that it's not going to be a mamzer, kedushin is tofes, and that will be a manafkamina of those two mandiyamim that argue on our Mishnah. And Agav the Gemara brought in of Meir that our Mishnahs are Meir that says that the Ketana does not get knas, but the Chacham say that the Ketana does get knas. That's how we seem to paskin. And the Gemara is Rosh of our Mishnah that holds that even Chayve Lavin and the Chayve Kares also there's a knas, is because these psukim basulos. There are two malachas that come out over there. One is that if the girl died before the payment, there's no chiv to pay because avian arav lo avian mesa, and also that the payment for a mafata, even though it doesn't say openly, it says mara basulos. Over there, it's also chamishim kesef. And anything else that we learned out? That was Rabbi Kiva. The different opinions of Rabbi Kiva. That more or less is the summary of today's Gemara. Yes, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.